A group of very successful businessmen were sitting around a table not long ago, and they were talking about success, and they'd spent many years in the subject, and they'd made many millions of dollars. And one of them summarized it by saying, success is goals, and all else is commentary. In fact, I've come to the conclusion that if you develop the ability to set goals properly and to work toward them on a regular basis, it'll do more for you than all the education, all the schools, everything that you could possibly get. Now, the subject of goals is a big subject. It's so big that they don't teach it in any of our schools. I eventually got back into university in my 30s. I took a postgraduate education, a master's degree, and I never got a single hour on goal setting. You can go through 10, 12, 15 years in our schools and never be taught what I call the master skill of success. Yet, you know something? If you look at successful people, if you study successful people, you look at their lives, you find that every single one of them, their lives went on in an average way, usually for a long time, and then suddenly they got a goal. They got a mission. They got a purpose. There was something that they wanted to accomplish, and it was very clear in their mind, and they wrote it down. And with a goal or a mission, a person will accomplish more in 1 or 2 years than the average person accomplishes in 5 or 10. Now, when I first discovered goals, I was 23 years old. I'd never heard of them before outside of sports. And what the basic education said to me was, if you have a goal, write it down, set a date for its accomplishment, make it measurable, make a plan, and get busy. So I took a piece of paper, a scrap piece of paper. I wrote down a couple of goals. What the heck, doesn't cost anything. I set a deadline, made a plan. I went out and got busy. I lost the paper. 1 month later, I had accomplished everything I'd written down. They were such ridiculous goals that I recognized it, even though I didn't have a copy of the list, that the very act of setting the goal seems to activate a whole series of powers in the universe. It seems to activate your subconscious and superconscious minds. It seems to activate the law of attraction, which draws people and circumstances to you. It's the most incredible darn thing in the world that when you start to set goals, you change everything about you. Some years ago, I worked with the Hunt Oil Company in Texas. The Hunt Oil Company was founded by H.L. Hunt, who became the wealthiest, self-made, multi-millionaire billionaire in the world. At his peak, he owned 200 companies and had a royalty income of $3 million a day. And he was interviewed by a friend of mine on television before he died in the early 70s. And he was asked, what are the secrets to success? He said, the keys to success have only been 2 through all my life, and I will tell you what they are. He said, number 1, he said, decide exactly what it is you want and write it down and make a plan to achieve it. And number 2 is determine the price you're going to have to pay to get it and then resolve to pay that price. Now, let me give you a quick exercise, which is my only take-home or homework exercise for our time together. I want you to take a piece of paper and write down 10 goals that you'd like to accomplish in the next 12 months. And then ask yourself this great question. If you could only accomplish one goal on this list, but you could accomplish it within 24 hours, which one goal would have the greatest positive impact on your life? Sometimes it's a financial goal, sometimes it's a health goal, sometimes it's a relationship goal. But whatever it is, put a circle around that goal, set a deadline on the goal, make a list of everything that you could think of to do to achieve the goal, and here's the kicker. Do something every day that moves you one step forward towards your major goal. My promise to you that this exercise, selecting your most important goal, making a plan, and working on it every day, will change your life in ways that you cannot imagine. It is the secret to becoming a self-made millionaire. It's the secret to great success in life. However, I've worked with Tom Stanley and Bill Danko. And Tom Stanley and Bill Danko are the ones who wrote The Millionaire Next Door. And Bill Danko did most of the heavy lifting. He did 25 years of detailed research, surveys, analysis, attending meetings, and so on, to find out how self-made millionaires think most of the time with regard to money. And you know what they think about most of the time with regard to money? They think in terms of financial independence. And whenever they have to make an expenditure or a decision with regard to money, they say, does this help or hurt? Does this add up or take away? Because everything counts. Now, what most Americans do is they want to be spend. They want to have fun, and put it on credit cards and so on. So the average American, the bottom 80%, lives on 110% of their income. The wealthiest Americans save 10 to 20% of their income from their first paycheck. They cut it off the top and they put it away, and they save it, and they build up cash reserves. The wealthiest Americans have 6 to 12 months in cash reserves that they never touch. Their net worth goes up at a rate of about 7 to 8% a year on their capital base.
they don't try to make a killing in the stock market or in .coms and things like that, is they save their money and they grow it carefully and safely. They're very attentive and thoughtful about their money. They're very frugal in their decisions. But what do they think about most of the time? They think about achieving financial independence.
It's absolutely amazing. Do you know what we found about self-made millionaires? Is they never buy new cars. Why? It's because in a new car, there's several $1,000s worth of depreciation. So what they do is they pick a car that they really like, they follow it in Consumer Reports and J.D. Power, and then about 2 or 3 years out, they go out and they look at cars that are for sale in that genre, and they look for ones with low mileage and good service records, and they buy a car that $10,000 or $15,000 worth of depreciation has been taken out of. And then they buy it, and they drive it for 5 or 6 years. They don't care.
And all the extra money that people are out there buying cars every year and so on, all that extra money, what do they do with it? Yeah, they save it carefully, put it away, and so on. And as a result, they become financially independent. If all you did was buy one car every 10 years and took all the rest of that money and invested it, that alone would buy you 3, 4, 5 years of retirement. I mean, think about that because of the miracle of compound interest. Tom Stanley talks about going to a conference of entrepreneurs that had been addressed by an economist the year before. And it was at the reception. And he heard people saying, what's yours? And he said, 8 and 4. What's yours? 10 and 2. What's yours? 6 and 3. What's yours? 18 and 2. What's yours? Made it in April. And he was asking people, what is this? What's yours? What's yours? What's yours? He said, well, last year we were taught by the economist to think in terms of how long we could survive financially if our income was cut off based on months and years. And so first thing we have to do is calculate how much would it cost me to survive for 1 month if I had no income at all. And then you multiply that times 12, and that's how much you would require to take 1 year off. Now, one of your great goals in life is to work by choice if you work at all. You want to have enough money so that you never have to work again. Anyway, so, and this is what self-made millionaires do, is they calculate their monthly rate, all right, times 12 to get their annual rate. I'll just write annual. And then they multiply that times 20, the number of years that they are planning to live after they retire, and that gives them what is called the number. Now, every person here is one of your responsibilities as an adult has to know your number. What is my number? And the number is the amount with which you could retire and never work again. And the interesting thing is, knowing your number, calculating your number, will increase your likelihood of achieving it by about 10 times. The likelihood of achieving it just soars astronomically because most Americans don't know what it is. Now, you guys are young and you're in your 20s and 30s and 40s and so on. You don't think about this, but self-made millionaires start to think about it at a very early age. And they hit millionaire status by the time they're 45. Others, making a fabulous living, end up at the age of 55 or 60 and they're broke. So, do you want to be financially independent? Say yes. Then think about financial independence. Anyway, so I'm going to teach you a go-forward word, and this is the word that you're going to use for the rest of your career. This is the word that will guarantee that you'll get onto the fast track in life, you'll increase your income at a more rapid rate than the average person, and you take complete control of your life. And the word is how. Say how. Okay, from now on, when you want to double your income, the only question you ask is how. You want to double your profitability, the question is how. You want to solve a problem, the question is how. Now, whenever you ask the question how, which is what leaders do, leaders are all how people. How do we resolve this? What do we do? What is our next step? What's our action? Non-leaders, followers, are passive people. Who did it? Oh my God, what's going to happen? What should we do now? Whereas leaders say, all right, what's going on? Let's go. Let's make a decision. What's happening here? Get the information, and so on. Now, when you ask the question how, it's like stepping on the accelerator of your own creative mind, and it throws off ideas. And every idea is for an action that you can take when? Now. It's for an action that you would take now. Whenever you ask the question how, you get ideas. And the interesting thing is, they did a study at Harvard. They found that the greatest single predictor of success, especially financial success in life, is creativity. And creativity is designed by the number of ideas you come up with. And you'll find that the more ideas you come up with, because of the law of probabilities, the more likely it is you'll come up with a great idea. So it's really important. Every time you ask the question how, you get ideas for action. Wow.
Every single person has what is called a line of sight. The line of sight is what you see when you look up. It's the job you do and what is going on around you. And everybody can find ways to improve what is going on in their line of sight. Let me just say this, that success in life is directly proportionate to the quantity of new ideas that you come up with on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. A person who comes up with a continuous stream of good ideas, or even a continuous stream of average ideas, is a person who is destined to great success in business. People who come up with no ideas or very few ideas are usually stuck where they are. So look in your line of sight. What do you see around you that may lead to improvements?
Every advance in human life begins with an idea in the mind of one person. It's ideas that you generate that enable you to solve your problems, overcome your obstacles, and achieve your goals. Ideas are the keys to the future. It's hardly possible for you to achieve anything of note except to the degree to which you think and do something new and different from what's been done before. All it takes is a small innovation to lay the foundation for a fortune and great success in life. Ideas are a mode of transportation, a vehicle that you can use to take you from wherever you are to wherever you want to go. Your job is simply to generate as many ideas as possible, to evaluate them carefully against your current goals, and then to take action on them. There's virtually no obstacle in life that you cannot overcome with the power of thought, with the power of creative concentration, with the power of ideas. Everything you see around you is the result of what was initially a single idea in the mind of a single person. Our entire world started from thought brought into reality. All great changes in human life and human destiny begin with an idea that causes you to see things differently and to take action that you would not have taken in the absence of that idea. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever your situation, you have the creative capacity in the form of an infinite ability to generate ideas to solve any problem and achieve any goal. It's up to you.
One idea can make you rich. A lot of good ideas can move you steadily upward in the work you do, and ideas are free. Now just think. There's nothing now being done commercially that will not be done better, much better in the years ahead. Next year's homes and most of what's in them will be better than this year's. Next year's cars will be better. Next year's manufacturing, distributing, marketing, and selling and advertising should be better. Nothing is now being done as well as it must be done in the future, and every innovation, every new improvement will be somebody's brainchild. Remember, whatever you now do for a living will be done differently, quite differently a few years from now. Never in the history of mankind have the opportunities for all of us been so great. But the great majority of people will be the beneficiaries of progress, not those who bring it about. Which group are you going to belong to? If you want to be a contributor, not just a beneficiary, here's the first rule. It says, the gold mine. The key to every human being's success lies in his mind, the gold mine between his ears. So, think. Think deliberately and with a purpose. Use the gold mine between your ears. Begin by thinking at a special time every day. Here's the best way I've found to make yourself think. Start getting up a little earlier than you're accustomed to. Right off the bat, this gives you extra time that 95% of the men in this country are not using at all. 1 hour earlier a day gives you 6.5 extra 40-hour weeks a year. But at this time in the morning, sit down to a clean sheet of paper. At the top of the paper, write your financial goal. Now, this is the amount of money per year you intend to earn soon. Incidentally, you might like to keep this to yourself, too. It's nobody's business but yours. Then, start to think. Think about your goal and what it'll mean to you and your family. Then see how many ideas you can come up with to help you reach that goal. Ideas to improve what you now do for a living. Try for 5 ideas every morning and write them down. And save those sheets of paper in a special idea file. Many, perhaps most of your ideas will be worthless, but some of them will be very good. A few will be excellent, and every once in a while you will come up with something really outstanding. You see, 5 ideas a day is 25 a week if you don't think on weekends. Now that's more than 1,000 ideas a year. One idea can get you to that income you're shooting for. Try not to think of things outside of your own line of work or whatever it is you're most interested in. To think well and profitably, you must discipline your thinking. Keep it on course, controlled, keep it in one field, specialize. Back during the Depression, a New York lumber dealer was growing rich while other lumber dealers were going broke. When asked how he did it, he said, every evening when I get home, I close myself up in a quiet room, sit in a comfortable chair, and ask myself, how will my business be conducted 10 years from now? Then I try to do it now. Instead of competing with every other lumber dealer, which is what they were doing, he was creating. He was doing the very thing man was designed to do, the very thing man does best. The experts tell us that every one of us has within him deep reservoirs of ability, even genius, that he habitually fails to use. Well, let's begin now to reach into these deep, rich areas of pure net profit and use more of our real abilities. Let's think.
Well, not too long ago, the great Nobel Prize-winning Dr. Schweitzer was asked in London, "Doctor, what's wrong with men today?" And the great doctor replied, "Men simply don't think. If we follow the crowd, we haven't got a chance. If we think independently and follow our good ideas with action and stay with it, nothing in the world can keep us from succeeding." Now let's look at the big picture calmly and analytically. Since statistics prove only 5% makes the grade financially, in a country where there's more than enough to go around, all the rest must be doing something wrong. And what do the leading educators and experts say is wrong with most people today? They just don't think for themselves. Well, it's obvious then that if we don't want to conform, because by conforming we miss the financial boat, we must think. We must think now, before it's too late. Naturally, I have no way of knowing what it is you do for a living or what your circumstances happen to be. But more than 20 years of research have proved one thing. No matter what your job may be at this moment, it holds the key to your future. It contains the road to greatness if it's handled in a certain way. There's no such thing as a job that is not loaded with hidden opportunities. From checking hats to laying bricks, from working in a factory to selling shoes, whether you work for someone else or for yourself, there is hidden in your daily work more opportunity than you could develop in a lifetime, if you will look for it. How many ideas do you think you could get in a single day if you really started to think? 5, 20, 100? Well, have you ever stopped to think that one idea can make you rich? How do you think your job will be handled 10 years from now? Can you do it that way now? What improvements will be made in your industry during the next 50 years? You know that improvements are inevitable. Someone's going to have to come up with them. Why not you? Your mind is a great and largely unexplored continent. You own it, and no one else can trespass upon it. We know it contains unbelievable riches, but they must be found, and there's only one way to explore and prospect the human mind. We must think. Like any other kind of prospecting, it takes time and dedication, but of this you can be absolutely certain. If you will begin to do your job as you have never done it before, and think constantly of ways in which it can be done better, you will immediately belong to the top 5%, and you will definitely get the ideas that will guarantee you a great future. Remember, no matter what it is that you are now doing for a living, it contains the key to greatness if you will only look for it until you find it.
Become a great leader. Leadership can basically be judged as all qualities, in my estimation, on a scale of 1 to 10. People at the bottom have very low leadership ability, and about 80% of the population have low leadership ability. And the primary reason is this, and I've studied this for more than 30 years, is if you look at the 80-20, one of the divisions, there's many divisions, income and so on, but the top 20% are proactive and the bottom 80% are passive. They're constantly waiting for someone to come along and get them cranked up. So my friend Jim Rohn says, if you're waiting for someone to come along, what if they don't show up? And many people are waiting their whole lives. They've got an excuse, they've got a reason. I'm not doing this, I'm waiting till then, I'll do it when this happens. They have what is called a when-then mentality. When this happens, then I'll take action. When I get ahead, or I get some money, or I get a guarantee, or something, then I'll take action. But leaders are proactive. And the interesting thing about leadership is not position, leadership is action. Is a person who acts like a leader is a leader that minute. So a person can go from being a passive person, a follower, to being a leader in one instant. All you have to do is begin to act like a leader. You think like a leader and act like a leader. And I want to give you some of these ideas. Okay, so number one, we say your personal leadership ability is the major limit on what you can achieve. Because what you do is you just set a goal and you make a plan and you work on that goal every single day. That's pure leadership. It's when you start waiting for something to happen and so on that you fall back into that bottom 80%, that passive. By the way, active versus passive is the major sociological economic division in our society today and probably worldwide. People who are really passive, the bottom 50%, are waiting for somebody else to give them some money. That's all. Is they're not willing to work for it themselves or save or suffer or sacrifice. They want somebody else to give them money. And if you go to an auction, if 50% of the population says, we want some free money, you're going to trigger enough politicians to say, if you vote for me, I'll give you free money. I'll take it from him and give it to you. There's a rule that says, and I won't talk about politics anymore, but there's a rule that says he who promises to rob Peter to pay Paul will always have the support of Paul. And that's all you need to know about modern politics is people promising to rob Peter to pay Paul. Only if you're the Peter, you don't want your money taken away. And if you're the Paul, you're all in favor. Hey, go get them. Go get those millionaires and billionaires. Millionaires and billionaires. Okay. So now we say that to become a great leader, number one, leadership is the most important factor for business success. When a team is in trouble, they don't fire the players, they change the coach. When a company's in trouble, they don't fire the staff, they bring in a new leader. A new leader can transform an organization. Number two is leadership is the ability to get results. Leadership means you get the results that are expected of you. You get the results for which you are responsible. You get the results that you have committed to get. If you start your own business, the results you've committed to getting are making sales and generating profits to provide for yourself and your family and so on and so forth. So results are the key. It's like a semicolon or a colon. There's a one-to-one between leadership and results. And you can be a leader without followers. You can be a leader in an organization. All the people in my company, by the way, are leaders. It's the most amazing darn thing. Every one of them is committed to getting results and requires virtually no supervision. They just require being pointed in that direction. And so you can be a leader without followers. You don't have to have a team to be a leader. As long as you're getting results, you're a leader. Third is leaders have a clear vision of the future. This is a mark of leadership is the top 10% of people have a very clear idea of where they're going. They have clear goals and clear plans that they're working on. Non-leaders follow the leaders. In fact, as Drucker said, the leaders think about the future. No one else is tasked with that responsibility.
Finally, a vision is an ideal future picture of the way you want your company to appear 5 years or 10 years from now. It's something that can cause people to give their dedication, their loyalty, their commitment. People can dedicate their lives, their talents, their abilities, their intelligence. And a vision also helps the company decide what they should be doing more of, what they should be doing less of, what is consistent with their philosophy and their values, and what is not. So it's very important that individuals and organizations sit down and think through what the vision should be. The greatest weakness that we have as individuals, which filters into our organizations, is that we sell ourselves short. We settle for less than we are capable of. We tend to compromise even in advance. And so the establishment of a vision begins with your imagining no limitations on what you could be sometime in the future. Decide what's right before you decide what's possible. Imagine that you're in the process of creating the finest organization in the world, that this organization would be recognized far and wide as the finest company or organization of its kind that's ever been created. So project yourself forward 5 or 10 years. Imagine that your company is now perfect in every respect. It is world class. It is respected by everybody in the industry. It has the finest people, products, processes, and services. What would it look like? What would it stand for? What would people say about it? If people were to come into the company, how would they describe it? And just allow yourself to play with this idea. This is called blue sky thinking, and it's practiced by all peak performing executives. They allow themselves to dream and to visualize what the very ideal would be, and then they come back from the future to the present day, and they think, what could we begin to do right now? What steps could we implement? What processes could we commence in order to begin moving step by step to where we want to be sometime in the future?
And finally, leaders have the courage to take action with no guarantee of success. Now, I could talk more about this, but here's an interesting discovery I came across. I read on the subject all the time, is leaders expect to fail over and over again. They expect to fail. They don't like it. They don't want it. They avoid it if they possibly can, but they know it is an inevitable part of moving forward is you're going to fall on your face. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to lose time, lose money. Product services won't work. People that you hire won't work out. Markets you go into, advertising you do. A lot of things won't work. The process of business success is a very sloppy system. There's a lot of failure involved, but they're willing to take it. They're willing to take the pain in pursuit of success. And remember that you'll find that successful people fail far more than unsuccessful people. Unsuccessful people are so preoccupied with not taking risks that if they do fail, it's at a very low level. Successful people hate the failure and they don't like the risk, but they take it anyway because that's the price. So therefore, when you have a situation where you have to take a risk, do everything possible to mitigate your risk. Interesting discovery, successful entrepreneurs are not risk seekers. You know, when the politicians who have never been in business say, well, they should be willing to take risks and they should, reach out and they should risk their money and so on. No. Successful business people are risk avoiders. They are very clever risk avoiders in pursuit of profit. They're not out there throwing their money around like gamblers in Las Vegas. They are very careful with their money. I know lots of self-made multi-millionaire entrepreneurs started with nothing. And the more successful they become, the more cautious and thoughtful they are. The more they plan and do due diligence in advance before they risk. They know that in any case, a good friend of mine said 2/3 of your investments, no matter how much due diligence you do, will not work out. They'll either lose a lot or break even or lose a little, but you have to be prepared that 2/3 of your ventures are not going to work out. And you have to minimize your losses with the best information and maximize your profits. But don't ever be afraid of taking a risk in the pursuit of success.
Courage means building within people the sense of personal power that enables them to take action when the outcome is uncertain. Trust is the most important quality of successful organizations, and trust means that people are allowed to make mistakes without being dumped on. They're allowed to take risks. They're allowed to try out new things. They're allowed to take chances when there is no guarantee of success, and they know that their bosses will not dump on them for a temporary loss of time or money. The most successful organizations are where people are the most creative and have the greatest amount of courage in trying out those ideas to see if they work.
So here are the 7 responsibilities of leadership. Number 1, to set and achieve business goals. That's what leaders do. That's your responsibility. The number 1 reason why senior executives of Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 companies are let go, according to Fortune magazine, is called failure to execute, failure to perform. They were hired, they put in that senior position, and they were given marching orders by the board, and they weren't able to deliver the goods. So they were fired, and now we have massive turnover at the really high Fortune 500 level. In every case, they just didn't set and achieve the business goals. Number 2 is to market and innovate.
Always looking for faster, better, newer, more original, different, cheaper ways to get the job done more effectively for yourself and your organization. Encouraging people to be creative means encouraging them to come up with ideas and never raining on their parade. The Japanese employees of large corporations generate 100 times the number of ideas that employees of American corporations generate. And you know the reason? The reason is because every single idea is respected, and every single idea is encouraged, and every single person with an idea gets an opportunity to try it out on a small scale. In American corporations, however, when somebody comes up with an idea, everybody takes turn dumping on the idea and pointing out all the holes in the idea. So pretty soon people smarten up and they say, hey, if I want to get along, I have to go along, and they just stop making suggestions. In story after story, where people have been honestly asked to contribute their ideas to the organization, the average employee has amazed management with ideas on how to improve productivity and effectiveness in the company. And when they're asked, why didn't you come up with this idea before? They said, I've always had this idea, but I never felt my ideas were welcome. So welcome ideas and encourage creativity. Allow people to come up with even ridiculous ideas and just listen to them.
3, set priorities and work on key tasks. There's always 100 things that you can do, but the ability to set priorities is one of the most important of all skills that we have as an adult, is to pick, if you have even two things, and I learned this from Ludwig von Mises, what is called the law of the excluded alternative. And it said this, that doing one thing means not doing something else. So if you have two things to do, one of them is more valuable than the other. One of them is always more valuable. On a scale, in terms of what is likely to happen, the results and everything else, one is always more valuable. The ability to identify and determine which of the two is most valuable and to do that, and only that, is a mark of leadership. The ability to set priorities throughout your business with regard to money, resources, time is absolutely essential. And this is something that requires thinking, because you are overwhelmed with too much to do and too little time. All right, number 4 is focus and concentrate where superior results are possible. And this is important. Many people focus and concentrate on things that are not that important. Ben Trigo had this wonderful line. He said, the very worst use of time is to do very well what need not be done at all. And it's amazing how many of us spend an enormous amount of time working on something that need not be done at all. At least it's not as important as other things that do need to be done. One of the things, and we'll talk about this later, but one of the questions I always ask is, imagine with your workload, imagine you could only do one task before you were called out of town for a month. And every single morning when you look at your list of work before you start, say, if I was to be called out of town for a month and I had to get one thing done before I left, which one would it be? And if you will do that, if you'll think like that, and because it'll pop out at you, you know what it is, then the question is, do you have the discipline to do that, rather than check your email and phone around and read the paper and get some more coffee and shuffle your papers and, stuff that I know you don't know anything about. And then here's the rule for great success, is do fewer things, but do more important things, and do more of them, and get better at them. Do fewer things, but do more important things, and do them more often, and get better at them. And that alone will double your income. The law of 3 will double your productivity starting tomorrow, if you have the discipline to only work on those 3. Number 5 is solve problems and make decisions. Here's a great discovery, and I've worked on this extensively. Your ability to solve problems is usually the critical factor in your promotion, your income, your success, and so on. Every single person, and Lawrence Peter wrote about this in the Peter Principle many years ago, every single person is promoted based on their ability to solve the problems that they meet at their level of responsibility. If you can solve those problems, you keep moving higher. Colin Powell, who I worked with a couple of times, said that leadership is the ability to solve problems. Success is the ability to solve problems. Between you and any goal you have, especially a financial goal, the only thing that stands between you is problems. Your ability to remove the obstacles that hold you back from achieving your financial goals is the critical skill of all. And what is the most important thing that solving problems requires? Thinking. Defining the problems clearly. Defining the solutions clearly. Picking the most important solution to the most important problem and taking action on it and working on it and expecting it not to work a few times until you finally break it through. One of my favorite stories, which you're familiar with, is Thomas Edison working on the electric light bulb. And the story of it is very interesting. It goes back for years. But bottom line is, after conducting 5,000 experiments, and these were mentioned in the newspapers, a journalist came to him and he said, Mr. Edison, why do you persist in trying to invent an electric light bulb when everybody knows that man was meant to light their way through life with kerosene lanterns? He said, you failed 5,000 times. Is that a good use of resources? And his answer was this. Remember, he said, young man, you don't understand the way the world works. I have not failed at all. I have successfully identified 5,000 ways that will not work, which puts me just 5,000 ways closer to the electric light bulb, and I will have the electric light bulb. It was experiment 11,332 or something like that, where the filament lasted and the light bulb burned all night, and it changed the world. But he said, there's no question. He said, all of success is simply taking away all the ways that don't work until the only way that's left is the way that will. And that's very important for us in business, is to realize every time you make a mistake, you say, hey, that's progress. That's one more way that doesn't work. Number 6, lead by example. Be a role model. This is a key responsibility of leadership, is once you take the roles, once you step to the front, everybody is watching you. You're like in a goldfish bowl. And your job is to be a role model.
And the way you organize your life to set the best example for others is very simple. It was defined in the universal maxim of Immanuel Kant some 300 years ago, where Kant said, live your life as though your every act were to become a universal law. So what you do is this. As you ask the question, what kind of a company would my company be if everyone in it was just like me? What kind of a company would your company be if everyone in it had the same work habits, applied themselves the same way, came in at the same time, concentrated on high priority tasks the way you do, stayed longer to get the job done? In other words, if everybody looked at you and did everything that you did exactly the way you do it, not what you say, but what you do, would your organization be a superb organization? What we know about leaders is that leaders imagine that everyone is watching them all the time, even when no one is watching them. Leaders carry themselves as role models as if everyone were sitting around them with clipboards taking notes on their behavior. Leaders recognize that the impact of their words, their performance, their behavior is inordinate on those people who report to them. And as a leader, if you set high standards for yourself, you will be, by extension, setting high standards for others.
So therefore, you always set the standard. Remember, everybody watches you. You're the standard bearer. You know, if you have children, what they found in psychology is that children are more influenced by your example than by anything else that you do or say. Well, anything else that you say. You can give them less lectures all the time, but in the final analysis, what they absorb is your example. They watch your example, and that becomes their template for the way you're supposed to behave as an adult. And many of us are still behaving as adults today based on the way our parents were when we identified with them when we were young, for better or for worse, by the way. Number 7 is perform and get results. In the final analysis, leadership is the ability to perform and get results. So always ask, what results are expected of me? In other words, what are the most important results that you are expected to get? Second of all is, what can you, and this is one of the greatest of all questions to keep you on track, is what can you and only you do that if done well can make a real difference? Every minute, every hour of every day, there's an answer to this question. And that is what you should be doing at that time. And sometimes it's a decision you need to make, or a customer you need to call, or a sales plan you need to initiate. But there's always something that you and only you can do. If you don't do it, nobody else will do it. But if you do it and you do it well, it can make a real difference. This is where you need to focus your limited time and energy. And finally, you ask this great question, what is the most valuable use of your time right now? And you go through your day with this question like a mantra in the back of your mind. What is the most valuable use of my time right now? And whatever you're doing, if it's not the most valuable use, stop doing it and start doing what is. This takes tremendous discipline, but as Goethe said, everything is hard before it's easy. So habits, good habits, are hard to form, but then they become automatic and easy. And the most important of all habits to form is the habit of working on the most valuable thing you can possibly be doing.
What do you think is the most prevalent, biggest single problem facing people in America today? Well, you've heard it said that there are 2 things that are inevitable in life, death and taxes, but today we know there's one more, and it's change. Change is the greatest single issue affecting yours and my life, and will be for the rest of our time on this earth. Let me give you 3 predictions that come out of Harvard University with regard to change. Prediction number 1, in your field, whatever your field is, there will be more change in the coming year than ever before. Number 2, there'll be more competition in your field than ever before, and the competition will become more and more determined. And number 3, there will be more opportunities in your field than ever before, but the opportunities will be different from the past. You know, the most important single thing that happens in life is the ability to spot trends and to be aware of changes and where the changes are going. In a recent Fortune magazine article on why companies fail, they said one of the major reasons for failure is the failure to anticipate how changes are going to affect their business and to go on doing things the same way. Now here's a rule for you, and I want you to write this down, and I want you to teach your children, and I want you to practice it and keep it as part of your life. It is this: the future belongs to the competent. The future belongs to the competent. The future is not shared by the competent so much, it belongs to the competent.
Well, let's make this point clear. The road in life with the heaviest traffic is not the best road to follow, for it is the road of the 95%. It is the road with no more opportunity,
and with 19 times as much competition. Decide to become a professional at your business. You see, we can either compete or create. If we compete with all the other people in our line of work, we must be willing to accept the same rewards. If that's what we want, fine. But if we want to become professionals at what we do, then we must create. And when we begin to do this, there's no limit to that which we can achieve. We hear a lot these days about a word called security. Everyone wants security, but not 1 in 10 can tell you what it is. Most people will tell you that security rests with a job. This is impossible. There is no such thing as a job that represents security. Anyone with a job can lose it for any one of 1,000 reasons at any time. There is only one place on earth you can find security, and if it isn't there, it isn't anywhere. It's inside of a person, never outside. If a man has security inside, where it belongs, his wife and children can feel it when he sits down to eat with them, and they're warmed by it. If a man has security inside where it belongs, you can see it walking down the street, and you can feel it when he enters a room. That's security, and you can't take it away from him. You can take away his money, his home, everything but a wife who's willing to start over, and most of them are, and drop him anywhere in the country. Go back in a year, and he'll be doing just as well as when you found him the first time. You can't keep a good man down, no matter what you do to him. Like cream on milk. You can shake it all day, but just set it down for a while, and it'll bounce right to the top again. This man or this woman has security, where it belongs. And do you know where it comes from? It comes from doing what we do for a living surpassingly well. It comes from being a pro in a world of amateurs.
It was Abraham Lincoln who said that the only security a person can ever have is the ability to do a job uncommonly well.
Becoming a pro isn't difficult. It comes from knowing what to do with time. It comes from knowledge, planning, and working. First, knowledge. This means learning everything we can about what we sell, learning everything we can about people, since that's who we sell, and learning everything we can about selling, since that's our profession. What we sell, who we sell, and how to sell. Those 3 subjects would fill a large library, but we can take things one at a time, and by devoting an hour a day to study, we can become outstanding professionals in 5 years or less. And it's the professionals in this business who can write their own tickets, good times or bad. They can live where they choose, and being professionals, work when they choose.
I had dinner with a gentleman named Gary Becker about 2 years ago in Chicago, and he's a Nobel Prize-winning economist. And he wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal, and he said, we don't have an income gap in America today. It's important to understand because the income gap is the big political thing. What we have is a skills gap. He said, it's like in a marketplace. You go into the marketplace or like an auction, and people with really good skills are being bid up. People, I want you, I'll hire you. And people with average skills or mediocre skills are just not really in demand. There's nobody demanding them. And what they find is that people in the bottom 80%, their average income goes up at about 3% a year. It's just pretty much the rate of increase of inflation and cost of living if they're employed, they're not employed. People in the top 20%, their income goes up between 11 and 25% a year. Now, if your income goes up at 25% a year, you'll double your income every 2 years and 7 months because of compounding. So you'll find that there's people on the what I call the low road who are just basically getting by, and then there's people who are constantly upgrading their knowledge. And sometimes it's only one piece of knowledge that can make all the difference in the world. But with regard to probabilities, we never know what the knowledge is. We never know whether it's going to be this, whether I pick it up in a magazine, I came here, I read a book, I listened to a program. So what you have to do is you have to be increasing the amount of knowledge that you're taking in. I use kind of like the Pac-Man model. You're going to chop, chop, chop. You've got to be gobbling information all the time, because you never know which piece of information will be the critical piece. There's that little line from Alice in Wonderland where there's the rabbits going, I'm late. And Alice says, why do you run so much all the time? Why don't you relax? He said, no, you have to run this fast just to stay in place. If you want to get ahead, you have to run twice as fast. And it's the same thing with our life today. Because of the way the world is, we have to run twice as fast just to stay even, or especially or to make any progress.
Imagine that we have a pool of water, and it's filled with fish. And these fish swim around and they live off the sustenance that's in the water today. All right? But then we have a drought. And the drought comes along, and what happens with the drought was the water level is reduced. So we have less water in the lake than we had before. Now notice what has happened here is we have the same number of fish, and they're just as hungry as they always were, and they now have to swim in a smaller body of water and get the same amount of sustenance as before. This is very much a picture of our national, regional, international, global economy, is that we have more and more competition because we have more and more fish in a smaller body of water competing for the same level of sustenance. Your job is to become more and more effective competing in a far more competitive environment than has ever existed before. The average person today, because of the speed of change, believe it or not, is making more decisions in a month than their grandparents made in a lifetime. More major life-forming decisions are made in a month, in many cases, than your grandparents made in a lifetime. When your grandparents came out of school, it was just understood. You got some basic training, either college or apprenticeship. You went to work for a large company. You worked for that company for the rest of your life. Today, those days are gone forever. Today, the rate of change is the most powerful single circumstance in our life. And I say that basically the race is on. It's not a matter of whether or not you like the race. It's sort of like a law of gravity. It doesn't matter what you think about it. If you step off a 10-story building, you're going to go splat on the sidewalk, whether you believe in gravity or know about gravity, or whether gravity is particularly convenient for you. Today, the rate of change is not only accelerating, it's getting faster and faster, but it is also discontinuous in that it is breaking up and it's coming from different directions. And people can be going along doing what they're doing for a long period of time, and something will come out of left field and just knock us off the map. So what is your goal? Your goal is to get into the top 10%. Your goal is to be one of the best.
You know, there used to be a story about Willie Sutton, the bank robber, and he was the most wanted in the FBI list. They finally captured him in the Midwest, tried him, convicted him, sent him to jail for life, and the reporters were covering the trial, and they asked him, Mr. Sutton, why do you rob banks? Remember this story? And why did he rob banks? Because that's where the money is, yeah. Now, why do you want to be in the top 10% in your field? Because that's where the money is, yeah. There's no money there's no money in the bottom 80%. The money is in the top 10 or 20%. That's where all the money is. And sometimes people don't realize it, that you're only a very, very small distance away from being in the top 10 or 20% where all the money is. There's a principle called the winning edge principle. And the winning edge principle says that people who succeed have the winning edge, which means sometimes they're just a little tiny bit better, or they're doing things just a little bit different in one particular area, and it leads to an extraordinary difference in results. There's a principle that says that if a horse runs in a horse race and wins by a nose, it wins 10 times the prize money of a horse that comes in second by a nose. Now, does this mean that the horse that came in first by a nose is 10 times faster? Or twice as fast? Or 50% faster? No, it's just a nose faster. People who succeed in life are a nose better. They're a nose ahead of people who don't even appear on the rankings. If you look at the Olympics, the people who win first place will be remembered. The people who win second place will be remembered by a few people. People who win third place will be quickly forgotten, and nobody else will be remembered at all. But it's always the person who wins by a nose. And do you see that competition where somebody won by 0.33 of a second, and that makes him the number one in the world? It's fascinating.
And here's something that's important. Whenever we say this, people say, well, gee, you know, the top people in my field, they're so successful, they're doing so well. Let me tell you, this idea of being in the top 10% is a major idea, and let me explain it. When I was growing up, I never thought I could be in the top 10% of anything. I failed in school. I did poorly in school. I got fired from jobs. Try getting fired. I used to pump gas in a gas station. I got fired from that because I wasn't good enough. I got fired from washing dishes. Try getting fired from washing dishes. It doesn't do your self-esteem very much good. I've gotten fired from more jobs than you've had. I mean, it never dawned on me that I could be good at anything. And then I learned something that changed my life. I learned that everybody in the top 10% started where? In the bottom 10%.
Everybody who's at the top and doing well was once at the bottom and doing poorly. Everybody who's at the front of the buffet line of life was once at the back of a line. Everybody who's at the top of your field was once not in your field at all. And anything that anyone else has done, you can do as well. It's almost like walking. If I said to you, I will pay you $1 million if you will walk from here to KL. Physically walk. Now, it doesn't matter how long you take. You can run if you want. But if you will just walk, you cannot take a ride, you have to walk. Now, if I told you, and you believe me, and the $1 million was there, you double-checked, all right? And you get $1 million from walking from here to downtown. Is there anybody here who could not do that? Okay. Okay. So we could all do it. Is that correct? Now, is there anybody here who is a runner, a jogger, really fit? But the point is that some people who are really fit will get there quickly. They'll do 25, 35 miles a day. Okay? Some people who are not very fit will do 5 or 10 miles a day. Doesn't really matter. Everybody who keeps walking will get there. Are you with me so far? This is an important metaphor. Everybody who keeps walking toward the top 10% gets there. If you keep learning and practicing and trying and reading and get associated with other people, if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, you will achieve that level of financial income. There's nothing that can stop you except who? Only you can stop you by stopping. And so therefore you find that people who have no advantages at all, but have one, is they just don't stop. They can be a complete idiot. They can have every disadvantage. They can have limited education. They could come from a terrible country with no opportunities. They could have no family and be survivors of a terrible experience, but they just put one foot in front of the other. They get to the front of the line. They get to the top 10%. You can be in the top 10%. So this is what I learned, which changed my life when I was 24 years old, is that if you make a decision to get into the top 10% and you don't take it back, you will get there. If you'll just do what others have done, you will get there. And it may take a week, it may take a month. Do you know how long it takes to achieve mastery in any profession? It takes 7 years to reach the point where you're in the top 10%. Some people may do it faster, but very seldom. It took year after year of working. Now, that doesn't mean that you're broke for 6 years and 11 months and suddenly you make a lot of money. It's a gradual uphill. But the fact is, to get to the point where you're making the kind of money that you're capable of, it will take 7 years. But the time is going to pass anyway. So you might as well be there at the end of the 7 years. Do you know how many people are still here at the end of 7 years? They haven't made any progress because they never put in the extra effort. They never made the decision. They never went for it. So to make a decision, I'm going to be in the top 10%. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. And you know what? There's nothing to stop you from getting to the top 10%. The only reason people don't get into the top 10% is why? They don't decide to. And if they decide to, they don't get started. And if they get started, they quit. All right? So it's very important. But optimists say, hey, I can be in the top 10%. I can be. And they just never quit. They just keep on going. No matter how much criticism they get, no matter how many problems they have, get fired from their jobs, they have setbacks and difficulties, they just keep walking. Just keep going. They just keep going. And they get there and people say, boy, you're sure lucky. No, you weren't. You make your own luck. You make your own luck by deciding where you're going and getting on the road. Now,
and please appreciate this, because I started so far down, I had to look up to see bottom. Please appreciate this. All you have to do is study what the top 10% of people do and do the same things. All you have to do is continuously learn and practice. Learn and practice. And as sure as God made little green apples, by putting one step in front of the other, you must get into the top 10%, as long as you set that as your goal. Now, I work with many of the best people in many fields. And here's the turning point. In every case, when a man or a woman goes to the top, it is after they make a decision to go to the top. And if you make that decision, I'll tell you what will happen, is that you will run into a lot of rough weather. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. You're going to have a lot of disappointments. You're going to fall back several times. In fact, we say that life is a process of 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And every time you feel you've made some progress, for a while, somebody else will make more progress than you. But if you keep at it and keep at it, you will ultimately get into the top 10%. Knowledge today, according to our statistics, knowledge is doubling every every 2 to 3 years, knowledge is doubling in your field. What does that mean? It means if your knowledge isn't doubling every 2 to 3 years in your field, you're in serious trouble. Do you know what we know? That an engineer who comes out of school today, 5 years later, is becoming obsolete. 10 years later, can be totally replaced by a brand new engineer, because the brand new engineer is learning technology and skills that the engineer who graduated 10 years before simply doesn't have at all. So therefore, if the young engineer is not constantly keeping up with his skills, after 10 years of experience, he can be obsoleted out and replaced by someone with 1 year's worth of experience who's got a fresh education. If in many industries today, if you were to take a sabbatical and go away for a year or two, when you came back, you'd have to start off way, way down the ladder, because most of the knowledge you went away with would be irrelevant when you got back. What does this dictate to you and I? It means that we must be continually taking in new information. We must be continually sharpening and upgrading our skills, or what is happening is the rest of the world will pass around us. And here's the most wonderful thing.
The only thing that sets us apart as human beings is our divine minds. Everything that means anything to us, our love of our families, our faith, our dreams, our talents and abilities, our religion, everything we know, is connected to us solely through our minds. Our minds represent our hope and our future. Yet, as a rule, it is the last place the average person will turn to for help. Your mind contains riches beyond belief, but you must prospect this rich and largely unexplored continent. And the only way it can be prospected is by systematic study and systematic thinking. Your mind is like a muscle. It will develop only to the extent that you use it, no more. By devoting an hour a day to study, you're building your mind into a powerful and creative servant. If you only do this 5 days a week, it comes to 260 hours a year. That's 1,300 hours in 5 years, or the equivalent of 162 8-hour days devoted to study and research. Believe me, if you'll do this, in 5 years you'll be one of the most accomplished professionals in your field, and you'll have the world on a string. You will virtually be able to write your own ticket. The average man works 8 hours a day, about 50 weeks a year, for 40 years. That's time enough to become great at anything. The time will pass anyway. We might as well reap the rewards.